Good morning, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown in beautiful, wet, rainy, cool Shenzhen, China for another outstanding interview with a fascinating and interesting guest today. His name is Mr. Jay Janson, and he is talking to me from New York City. Good morning, Jay. How are you doing?
Morning, Jeff.
It's just an amazing how we found each other. You have started a website called Prosecute U.S. War Criminals Now.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Not quite. Not
go
quite.
ahead. Go ahead. Change
Big,
that.
big mistake to use the word war, because there hasn't been a war since World War II. Everything else has been named wars by media afterwards.
Yeah.
Everything was a police action, humanitarian intervention, whatever, but no war. And that's
Okay.
why
Gotcha.
if we use the word war, then they can come back and say, well, war crimes, it's just, war is war, and the Vietnamese committed war crimes against us too, something silly like that, So it's not everybody, because it's just been drummed into us that we can say war, U.S. wars,
I will put your website on in the article, and for all of our China Rising Radio Sinoland fans out there, Jay has an interesting background in music, and when he sent me his resume, I was like, my jaw was dropping. He is a trumpetist, and he has played with, and I'm not exactly an expert in classical music, but when I saw names like Zubin Mehta, Lorin, Maazel, Karl, Boehm, Previn, Pablo Casals, Yo Mama, Leonard Bernstein, and then I saw that not only is he a trumpetist, but he's a full-fledged symphony conductor, having conducted in Bangkok, Shanghai, the Vietnam National Symphony, the Pan-Asian Chamber Orchestra in Calcutta, the Myanmar Symphony. He's been a founding professor in Korea and Hong Kong, and not only that, he is not only a classical trumpetist, but he is fluent in Spanish, and so he also has a whole body of work and with Afro-Cuban artists and students who are now well respected in the trumpeting genre around the world. So, Jay, it's really wonderful to have you on today.
My pleasure.
Just go ahead and tell us, you and I are really want to talk about politics. Just tell us a little bit about, since I am in Asia and you have, worked in 50-something countries, including Thailand and Shanghai and Vietnam and India and Myanmar and Hong Kong and Korea. Just tell us a little bit about your musical career over here in Asia, and how you perceive Asians in terms of, obviously this is Western music, and so how do you perceive the Asian musicians and their viewpoint of Western classical music? What do you think?
Well, let's see. You threw out a lot at me. I'm not where to start. But let me start first with about myself. I abhor the word politics because what it means to people is it's an opening for them to say, "Oh, I'm not interested in politics." And by politics, I just limit that politics is the difference between the parties that the gangs that run countries. That Gaddafi never permitted in his country, and Fidel Castro also not. As far as my bebopping around, this came, it's just amazing circumstance. You know how you feel like, well, I believe that destiny is I believe like Asian. I've studied Buddhism. I am a student of intellectual Buddhism, most important thing Buddha ever said was, don't trust what anybody tells you, not even me. And so that was at the end of his life. And now, when I wind up going everywhere, and I went so many different places, you know, of those 67 countries, 14 of them were communists when I was there, and I always feel comfortable in a country being ruled by a communist party, including by happenstance, I was working on a film in Ethiopia when Mengistu was in power, you know, and afterwards, of course, as always, they blamed Mengistu for blood in the streets and bodies in the streets that were created because the CIA overthrew him. A very complicated procedure. But it was a wonderful experience there, and the Ethiopians were just, you know, a minister of finance and a minister of travel was, they were just exemplary people. And so, you know, this just seemed to happen, fall from out of the blue, an invitation to go there, to play become a lifetime contract with the top orchestra in Italy, in Rome, the Rome Symphony Orchestra, TV, radio orchestra. And we got to the point where, you know, colleagues of mine were thinking I was CIA for sure, because whenever there was something in the news, it turns out Novak was there a little while before or something like that. So, but I follow my heart, and I'm not very egocentric. You know, I think I left that when I became a little different person as a archival research people's historian working for Ramsey Clark, former Attorney General, the biggest turncoat against the establishment in the history of this country, followed by Paul Craig Roberts, who's a friend of yours, I know.
Yeah, we stay in touch by email.
He was former, you know, not only Undersecretary of State under Reagan, but he was also years and years chief editor of Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, that's true.
And that this man is the most, you know, if I was on the other side of the fence, I'd say, man, this guy's rabid. You know, he is really so down out, frank about the criminal establishment that is the Western governments that have followed the colonial, genocidal colonial policy since it all began 5 centuries ago. But I mean, I got to the point where I can boil myself down to what I'm aiming for, and that's just stop the genocide earlier than it's going to be stopped anyway. Instead of saying, you know, I want to be part of stopping the genocide, now I just want to be part of bringing it to a stop earlier than otherwise. And by otherwise, well, to make a long story shorter, I came upon, after maybe 10, 12 years of trying to convince, even threaten, even call them accessories after the fact of all my mentors and my colleagues, I found that, to my amazement, a number of years ago, that no one is willing to call a spade. No one is willing to call for the prosecution of themselves, of the first world. No one. Yeah. And worse than that, and I'm very close to everybody in Venezuela. I even met the president and everything, and I couldn't get them either to quote Martin Luther King. If you can't speak on your own word, quote the damnation of Martin Luther King and the bloody words he spoke about Vietnam. I mean, so all this represented a terrible failure, Jeff. And before I came to find you and the China Rising, Capitalist Roads, Socialist Destinations, I, on my own, I noticed, I came to the conclusion, you know, The Economist magazine years ago explained how in 30 years the rest of the world economy, as opposed to the white world economy of Europeans and their descendants in America and Canada and New Zealand, Australia, that economy will be dwarfing will be overcome in 30 years, be larger than the economies of the United States and Europe. And with that, of course, is obvious that they not only lose control of financial affairs halfway, but eventually the United Nations and its courts. And since I've been my one focus is on justice with Ramsey Clark. He's gone all over the world fighting for justice for people under attack from the colonial establishment in one way or another. And I'm trying to focus it down to why is this mystery? Why is the Nuremberg Principles unmentionable? That's a real mystery. I mean, I confess, I'm baffled. You know, and I've written articles about it. The last UN session we had was on the anniversary of the Nuremberg Principles being adopted, but it was only the anniversary of the United Nations that interested the last session of the United Nations. They kept talking about the United Nations, not anything about the Nuremberg Principles. And even at the same session, when Latin Americans get up and deride the United States for atrocities, et cetera, nobody mentions the law. Now, how are you going to stop something that pays money? Crime does pay without the law. So that's I'm coming to your point now. The happy part of this discovery is I say, you know, if I know this, and Economist magazine, which is like the Wall Street Journal of England, you know, if they know it, then those people on Wall Street that have financial advisors, albeit that it's famous, they never had to think in long-range terms like the Japanese did after World War II. They're just making so much money hand in hand, hand over hand. Still, it's so obvious that the changing world is coming upon us. And China, having lived in China like you, and having known the Chinese is completely different than the Western world, Asia itself, that we're going to have something felicitous in the future. We're going to have a Chinese renaissance of humanity, a Chinese-led renaissance of humanity, because the whole idea of Chinese civilization, as you know, from Kung Fu to loss of face principles and everything, it all has to do with cooperation and consensus, and not confrontation and aggressiveness, which is a sign of insecurity. And the Chinese, as you point out in your book, have no reason to be insecure. They've been on top, the top nation in the world for thousands of years. And so then I come across you. Oh, first of all, back up 1 second. This realization is my savior. If I don't understand why the Nuremberg Principles can be not mentioned, not even mentioned once, only Gaddafi in his 2009 speech called for justice and called for investigation of every bombing and invasion after World War II, including investigating the United Nations for torching Palestine and Korea and other places. Well, only he. Now, this is a mystery, but now I've got something positive. I don't have to be negative anymore. You know, suddenly I said, oh, now I can be philosophical like the Chinese are. My Chinese students would say to me, what the hell what are you doing and getting yourself all fussed up about eventuality, you know? And so now, then I come across your book. No, before I come across your book, I begin my own book. And
great. I can't wait to read it.
I began actually a book that is an introduction, and I thought of the size of Arundhati Roy's Capitalism, a Ghost Story, which is like a little over 20,000 words, not much more. It's a small, bendable book.
Yeah.
And so this is a overall book that says what you're saying, and what I've been saying myself. Well, you say it much better, but So that this awakens all the basic deceptions, the basic big deceptions that the rest of the lies float on top of. Deception one is that the colonial genocidal period of 5,000 years has been one of civilizing, which is a joke, of course, but that's one big deception. It's so easily knocked over with what you've discovered, what I've discovered. And another big deception is that World War II was not caused by the United States investing head over heels with every top corporation and all Roosevelt's cronies investing in the cheap labor of prostate Germany to build up the Wehrmacht to invade the Soviet Union and calling it a bulwark. They said, we're just bulwarking. And that's another basic deception. There's basic deception that are less deep, like the one of blocking out Martin Luther King's Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence for a half a century. No mention in the media for half a century. And so I got a book about 12 deceptions, which included at the very end, because I'm a student of anarchism, the philosophy, the deepest philosophy of anarchism. And so we'll leave that for another time, but I've been talking too long.
Well, I tell you what, if you have finished that book, I've looked over your website and read quite a bit of it. But if I missed the book in there, please send me the link, and I will promote it.
No, I didn't write the book
yet. Okay, well,
but I have written a couple more than halfway a number of the 12 books that were suggested by the fact that China is rising.
Okay, great. All right. Well, let me tell you one of the reasons that people are reluctant to name names like Western leaders and presidents and prime ministers and politicians is that when they do, they tend to have their lives shortened. I mean, let's not forget what happened to Muammar Gaddafi, the president of Libya. He was brutally sodomized on film and then murdered for standing up to Western empire, what I now call Western tyranny. And a lot of people don't know, but the Kuala Lumpur Human Rights Commission, which is the national equivalent of the International Criminal Court in The Hague, which now more and more people are derisively starting to call the International Caucasian Court because it's so blatantly racist.
Right.
But a lot of people don't connect the dots. But in fact, the Kuala Lumpur Human Rights Commission did convict George W. Bush, did convict Tony Blair, and did convict Benjamin Netanyahu of crimes against humanity. And it is not a coincidence, Jay. It is not a coincidence that because the Kuala Lumpur Human Rights Commission did convict Bush, Blair, and Netanyahu, three certifiable genocidal world leaders, that in the span of 9 months in 2014, 3 Malaysian flagship airplanes went down, and that was MH370, which involved China, MH17, which involved Russia, and then the third one, I don't remember the name of the number. It's QZ8501 or something like that. But that's the Air Asiana that disappeared, which is also owned by a Malaysian. And so these people, these elites that control the West, are fiendishly vengeful. They kill, they murder. They extort, they blackmail, they bribe.
Can I jump in?
And anyway, so it is not a coincidence that 3 Malaysian flagship planes went down in 9 months following the conviction of 3 Western leaders of crimes against humanity by a Muslim country, which is Malaysia. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, here's the way I feel about it. You know, when you one way of researching is researching like you're talking about right now, and it's all true, and it's things that the people don't, ordinary people don't know. In fact, if you told them, they'd say it sounds crazy. They would believe a dressed-up lady on CBS rather than you. But it is a diversion to start worrying about, was the 9/11 real or wasn't it real, unless you can nail it. It's a diversion, to think about all these nitty-gritty things, because they have so much ultimate power to maneuver things all around that you can waste your life trying to get into their web and figure some truth and be proud that we can say some truthful things. So my book based on China Rising, which I came to conclude a little bit before I found your excellent books. One of my books, actually, I'm just sending it to Noam Chomsky.
Oh, really? Cool.
Almost finished. And it was originally the source of I can't think of the word, not wars, but the source of all this genocide is speculative investment banking, because it's just the greatest investment. And it started at the very beginning when the first Portuguese ships were joint ventured, like a bank. Joint ventured people sending out a trading ship loaded with cannons, and the Portuguese going around Africa and the coast of India and slaughtering people, and Columbus going over to the west and doing the same. And that was the same. It was investment banking. Noam Chomsky has a wonderful book, and Noam Chomsky has his limitations. But the best one of the books I ever read was the Year 501, The Conquest Continues, which was basically a history of the rise of speculative investment banking, and it's the key that runs all the wars. However, the title of the inside, the book that I'll send you, has to do with the idea that people think presidents have any personal power when it comes to war, starting or ending a war. And I take everyone going chronologically backwards from Obama all the way to George Washington, and I show by their own words and by the words of key people like Rothschild and famous Americans and reports, and I show that it just doesn't make any sense to think that these people, by their own personal influence or decisions, could pull something off. And if they ever tried, we have 4 assassinations of American presidents to point to. As you pointed to something about violence in Malaysia, we can point to Kennedy having threatened to dissolve the CIA, having fired Rockefeller's in-law. Running the CIA. I mean, you just don't do things like that, get away with it. And Lincoln did things he couldn't get away with. And I don't know if you know, but
and every president that's been assassinated has been anti-big bank, anti-oil banker, and even Andrew Jackson. Actually shut down the central banks, and they didn't kill him, but they tried to. They had He had an assassination attempt, and there's even speculation that Reagan was shot at because he was trying to stop the nuclear arms race with Russia, which would cut into defense contract sales.
Yeah.
And so these people play for keeps. I tell you, a person I'd like to bring up is Dr. Modi Nasani, who I've interviewed several times, and he's now publishing on the Greenville Post. And you mentioned banking, and he's got some wonderful articles about the oil bankers and the banking families. And you're absolutely right. I mean, they literally call the shots They run the deep state, and it all coalesced around Truman signing the National Security Act of 1947, which legalized the CIA and the Department of Defense and the National Security Council and the four branches of the U.S. military, and that basically codified and legalized, the deep state, and people don't even realize that, the people that started the CIA were all Wall Street bankers and lawyers. And so the CIA is just basically a big business criminal enterprise that the taxpayers pay for, and so they play for keeps. I mean, I joke with my wife that, well, I'm glad that I only get so many, tens of thousands of listeners around the world, because if I got hundreds of thousands, they'd probably come over and kill me. And because if you get big enough and famous enough, and lives get shortened, people get cancer, people have heart attacks, people have car crashes, people have unexplained suicides. I mean, this is what these people do. They don't screw around. They'll just kill you.
I think one of my articles I mentioned that the reason we know exactly what Noam Chomsky is that we know he's not a target for assassination, where Martin Luther King was. So there's a crux. Whatever Noam Chomsky's doing, he's not doing what Martin Luther King did. Martin Luther King was actually endangering investments.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
The Vietnam War, trillions of dollars invested in the Vietnam War. They're going to let this guy make a march on Washington, a second march, connecting the war with the poverty in America? No.
Yeah.
No. So
one of my biggest complaints about Dr. Chomsky, and he is a brilliant intellectual, and he's added valuable research, but he completely denies false flags, and as well as many people do that probably know better otherwise, but they probably also realize that if you start exposing false flags, then you start stepping on powerful toes, and it may be a survival mechanism to not talk about 9/11 and the Boston bombing and on and on and on. So, but otherwise, he's brilliant, and I've listened to many of his speeches and talks and interviews, and read many of his articles, and so I have a lot of respect for him. But I can sort of rationalize why he refuses to accept the reality and truth of false flags, because maybe he does want to live a couple more years longer than otherwise.
Yeah, I would agree. Noam Chomsky is what I call in-house opposition.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
All the opposition that we have in the Western world. Even if you talk to Mata Air's founding in Malaysia at the court of investigation and everything, you see, it doesn't enter into Malaysia's clout as a government to say anything, to produce anything in the UN. No, nothing. It's just an entity on a separate rail. I mean, you have the rail of worldwide deception and making genocide, profitable genocide. And right next to that is another rail that makes the railroad, is all the organizations that protesting, in the sense that Shakespeare wrote that the lady doth protest too much. That protesting never stopped, never made any waves at all and never stopped any war, never had any effect, except to assuage the conscience of people protesting and making them feel they're innocent of the crimes that they're. I think that divides me. I divided a long time ago. I'm not one of the. I'm guilty. I'm not one of those people who are innocent because I'm against the killing. I'm guilty as an American living among all these people and saying hello to them every day. Because I can't do much else. No, I'm in the belly of the beast, and I'm guilty. I can't drop it as long as I'm still an American. But Jeff, I want to talk about your book a little bit more, because I have to ashamed to mention that I have not read the book. I read everything about the book that you said, But I get books from the library because I can't afford to buy books. So sometimes I go to read them, and I haven't had time to go read yours. And one of the reasons I didn't bother to go read is because I heard enough about it to think this guy is the same as me.
Well, I'll send you as a guest on my show. I will send you. Do you mind reading on your computer?
No.
Okay, but I'll send you an electronic copy. It is going to be print. It is going to be in print copy, print version. Early in 2017. In fact, I think the galleys are already being prepared for print publication. But I will send you a complimentary copy, Jay. Before we move on, I do want to point out that you have brought up something so true about this incredible frustration. You know, the Sisyphean, like we're just like pushing a rock, up a hill. Yeah. And a boulder up a hill and just never make it to the top. And I remember very, very succinctly after Charlie Hebdo, because my wife is from Paris, and after Charlie Hebdo, and I showed her all the evidence that it was obviously a false flag, and she was so demoralized, and it was an epiphany for her. But then the sense of helplessness, and I think this is the problem. And then I showed my daughter, 9/11, and showed her conclusively that it was a false flag. And then her teacher at school actually had the courage to show a 1-hour documentary on it in class. And my daughter said, "Oh yeah, but all the students knew that it was a false flag. They already knew that it was it was fake."
That's good to hear.
And I'm sitting there, I'm going, but there's this sense of resignation and helplessness that our governments can be, killing people, not only dark-skinned people around the world, the 85% of the people that are not European, Euro-American Caucasians, but killing their own people, committing false flags. And no one can do anything about it. I mean, we know that Martin Luther King was killed by his own government. We know that Robert F. Kennedy was killed by his own government. We know that John F. Kennedy was killed by his own government.
That's what I want to interrupt. That's why I say you and I, and especially you, because you got it done, rather than go this way and piddle on the issues and where they have control and we don't. It's better to go into the future and see the future coming and use that as it's happening actually right now. I'm the only one that has written that the effect of China Rising has been in this last election. And it's impossible to think that Trump, some kind of a freaky individual, jumped out of the shadow someplace that didn't have a powerful group of investors on Wall Street that wanted to do an about face as China is coming at them. China is rising, do an about face. Invest in this country rather than making head over heels fortunes for the rich, investing in the cheap labor in the third world. At the same time, bringing the day that much closer that the third world engulfs the economies of the first world. Because it's inevitable that 6 out of 7 human beings on the earth are no longer be controlled forever by one of the 6. The same as Gandhi told the British, and the British said at this big meeting they finally had, this guy reasonable, and they say to him, "Mr. Gandhi, do you think we're just going to get up and leave?" And he says, "Yes, because with 700,000 of you, or however we put it, China controls 700 million of us. We no longer want to be controlled." And so that's exactly what's coming. Now, if I can see this, if Jeff Brown can see this, man, these people are controlling fortunes and fortunes. Don't they see this coming too? They say that their money is under stress now. They're forced to do something intelligent. Why continue this is head over heels profiting and controlling the profits, like Martin Luther King said, by atrocity wars on 3 continents since 1945 to maintain the predatory investments. You know, at the same time, you see what's happening now with the media. The media is controlled, as you mentioned already, by the CIA, and the CIA is, I think you understated it as you tried to say how big the CIA is. But I just read a book by Nick Turse. You know Nick Turse?
No, is that the one that Paul Craig Roberts recommended about?
I'm sure.
CIA Inc., where basically it talks about how it's just a gigantic organized criminal corporation. I know Paul Craig Roberts recommended a book.
Yeah, everybody knows that. But no, here's what this book was about. This book was astounding, as he started out the book by saying, you know, what he did in the morning, what his wife did in the morning, what his kid did in the morning, what toys they handled, whatever they handled, wherever they went, where they came in contact. And he showed that everything they came in contact with was made by companies that have received enormous funds from the Pentagon, sometimes overwhelmingly controlling funds. And the Pentagon and the CIA, no one can underestimate. They're in every nook and cranny of our lives, from the cookies we eat to, you know, just it's incredible. So I mean, all the more so. Us too, and if we speak again, I'd like to focus more on China, because your viewers might not know as much as some of us, but I often say, you know, the exposing protest movement, anti-imperialist movement, exposing things that don't really need to be exposed. I mean, my Guatemalan paper hanger that I talked to yesterday, you know, these people, these immigrants are coming from the other world, these non-white people, they don't need to even read or see, they can smell what's going on, you know. And so I like to focus on how China, I don't know how much in your book you focus on the culture of China, not the political influence of China, not the economic influence of China, but the day-to-day behavior of the Chinese, which is so different than what I've been brought up with. I don't know, maybe you had a better beginning than me, but you know, I just over-sexed and everything else, the women being used as sex jobs. Because I remember the first time I went to China Dalu from Hong Kong. I had this feeling as if I was going back in time in the States to a time when the sex was not in the air. And you know, I was very relieved. I felt very comfortable. I could look at a woman and not my mind racing ahead of me, you know.
Yeah.
And even though within a few years of this time where I visited the musicians area in Shanghai, and the daughter took me by the hand, and you know, there's a lissom young lady holding my hand. You know, I wasn't old at that time, and walking down the street, we had to go register because it was early '80s, and no problem, you know. And if a girl looked at a boy or a boy looked at a girl, everyone's whispering, "Oh my goodness, here, look, it's going to happen in marriage or something," you know. And then within a few years, my student says to me in Wuhan, he says, after a lesson, he said, "Well, Maestro, come to my dormitory, you know, at the university." And I go there. He's living with a girl. He's living with a girl. Maybe about 1 or 2 years after that started to happen in the States. Just started to happen.
Yeah.
Boom. It was already happening in China. But China has a resilience in when I have people that argue with me about China's going, like your book proves, is not going hook and sinker down the capitalist drain, because it has too many thousands of years of behavior. It's based on intelligence, based on experience, based on the only country that's been fortunate enough not to be overrun, like the early civilizations in Sumeria and in Egypt and other places in India. So I really,
well, I tell you what, why don't we do that? Why don't we, I think we've had a wonderful conversation. Why don't we, and we've been talking for about 45 minutes. Why don't we have a second interview? Are you up to a second interview, Jay? And we'll talk about China.
Absolutely. I noted, I sent you an email just a moment ago and I said, let me know how long it's going to be, but from my point of view, I think we could talk forever, because as we talk more, we can get the fluff out of the way and get more into, you know what I mean? And by fluff, I mean things like Noam Chomsky, you criticize him, Noam Chomsky said, and by the way, Ramsey Clark has an uncomfortable feeling about him. Noam Chomsky, who is my mentor, has helped me out a lot, so I really don't want to criticize him, but, he said about Gaddafi was a brutal dictator. I mean, here's a guy that raised his country bloodlessly, revolution from poorest to the richest, to the highest quality.
The richest country in Africa, yeah.
No, richest, the highest quality of life index, higher than Russians and 8 other countries in Europe the year before by the UN index of quality of life. No, forget it. But at the same time, he's suggested I flesh out an article that I sent him years ago, and I've done it now. I've pretty much finished it. It didn't turn out to be, instead of 20,000, it was more like 60,000, but it's a substantial book. But the title of that book is "Until the UN Partition is Recognized as an Archetypical Colonial Crime Against Humanity, ... In other words, until we see exactly the way the partition torched Palestine is obvious trick, subterfuge, or what do you want to call it, bloody obvious. And I pulled all those stops. I went back to the origins of Zionism from the beginning, when it was so socialist, incredible socialist. When the earliest of Zionists, Moses Hess, was a colleague of Karl Marx and Engels, and as a personal experience, this is my life that I could talk to you forever, because my life has always been these truth gestures that I've even look back upon. Do you know, when I was in conservatory in New York, I was invited to perform in the summer camp of by the Metropolitan Opera drummer and the New York Philharmonic guy and the brother of the concertmaster in the Philadelphia Orchestra, to play in the Wakeman Circle camp on Sylvan Lake. This was so socialist, and across the lake was a communist split off. And I spent the whole summer, I spent the most delightful summer of my life in this organization which is devoted to Yiddish culture, not Hebrew, Yiddish culture. And I don't know who Sholem Aleichem is, but the Yiddish culture is so filled with art and music and loveliness. And this was already, when the war was already finished, about that 1950s and 1948. And these people were so international socialist oriented, nothing like what you see in Israel from the time that the Zionism was hijacked with called revisionist Zionism, which Einstein was against. I quote Einstein throughout. I use Einstein as a barometer, using his quotes throughout the years about what was happening. So
he was quite a socialist. Well, I've written a lot about Zionism. In fact, in my first book, 44 Days, I even talk about how that Palestine is like the litmus test of the world, and that the gates have changed. The gates of Jerusalem have changed hands 44, 45 times, and they'll change again. But it really is the hub of the wheel. in terms of world events. And to me, as long as the United Nations and Russia and the United States and France and everybody else can sit there and watch what's happening over there to the genocide of the Palestinians, it's like there's not much. As long as we're willing to put up with that and watch that, then we are willing to accept anything.
Well, that's why I have a book on the media. You see, because what you're talking about is a charade. For 60, 70 years, they're trying to convince us that they're searching for peace in Palestine. That's a charade. It's a joke. There's no intention. They want what they have, a colony of Europeans in the midst of the oil fields to do what's good for money invested. But your book, I'm wondering. I'll have to read the book before we talk further, I guess.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll send you a copy of an electronic copy, because that doesn't cost any postage. You can read it on your computer, and then when you get finished, let's talk about China and let's have a follow-up interview sometime after the holidays. How's that sound?
Yeah, and I'll send you. You just skim it,
oh no, I'll read. Send me what you sent Noam Chomsky, and I'll be happy to read it.
Yeah, well, you can't read it because it's 60,000 words. You got more things to do than to learn.
No, I just finished reading a book about the Cultural Revolution. That's all I do. I never stop reading. I'm reading a book about ancient China. Before the Han Dynasty, I read. I'm a nonstop reader, so I promise you I'll read it if you send it to me. So let's read each other's books. And then let's have another follow-up interview. But really focus on China and Chinese, and China's role in the world today and yesterday and tomorrow. And I think with your years of experience here and my years of experience here and I think we could have a wonderful interview about that and what it means to the rest of the world and our fans out there.
And I just put a PS on that.
Sure.
Ramsey Clark and I are about seeding confidence, because there's no confidence in the world. There's no confidence. Now, your book has a big chance because, see, for years I've realized I don't want to write anymore to this readership that I have. This readership of first world people, they just want to be informed. They're happy to read my articles and say, "Oh, look at that. That's really good. Now I understand it." Understanding is the booby prize. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What is your motivation in reading my articles? I read your articles with a different motivation, and so I wanted to ask you: for years I wanted to reach people in the third world. I have a sidekick that's from Ghana, and I've tried, and he sends it all over Africa, my articles, but there's no place anywhere. I know a bunch of languages. I did a lot of translation between quite a few languages and English, but I've even submitted articles translated into Spanish to various places in Latin America. I'm very close to Latin America, lived all over the place there. And I can't get anything published. Nobody's interested in this point of view of, number one, confronting the beast.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a provincialism. Every dog for itself. Venezuela for itself, maybe a little bit with Bolivia, but maybe a little bit with Latin America, a little bit. But, the Koreans, the Vietnamese, the Iraqis. If you're in Venezuela today and you're being threatened and your lives are cost because of the confrontation with the United States, why can't we use this China Rising to make people realize that if you don't care what's happening in Syria, you can expect the Syrians are not going to care what's happening in Venezuela.
Yeah. You
can expect it. But when I was on tour with Ballet Theater in 3 months in Latin America in the 60s and 64, everywhere, that was the year of revolution. I spoke behind closed doors, professors as the government was overthrown of João Goulart in Brazil. I spoke with ministers. I had a letter of introduction from Columbia University Latin American Studies that made me reach ex-ministers and everything. But all the campuses were just filled with international, solidarity with South Africa, Vietnam, Dominican Republic, everything that was going on. It's not there now. It's not there. It hasn't been there for a long time. So we're in this never period where your book, the influence of your book, has not come true yet. But I want to ask you, did you by chance read about 2 articles about this past election and what it means in regard to China Rising?
No, I'm sorry I didn't, Jay. I will read those along with your book, and then when we do our follow-up interview about China. I've been so busy. See, I'm publishing another book that's coming out next month, hopefully, and I've just been totally absorbed getting that finalized, and have ignored a lot of stuff on the internet. So please send me those, and I'll read those too. And
you have a chance to have your book translated in Chinese and translated to other big third world.
I actually just got back from Beijing 2 days ago, and I actually had a meeting with a big Chinese publishing company up there, and they're very interested in my books, and so hopefully, and they don't just translate into Chinese, they translate into Spanish and Hindi, and they have a worldwide reach. It's one of the biggest publishing houses in China. So if that happens, that would come true.
So happy to hear that, because that's where I was. I actually wrote a letter to my contacts here at the China Embassy, the China Consulate in New York, because I was invited to the 60th anniversary of the founding of Chinese people.
Congratulations!
And I do a lot of performing for Chinese affairs in town, because I speak some Chinese, and Jesus, that's what I wrote. I tried to, and finally one of a Chinese publisher, a friend of mine here, he said to me, look, and I realized at the same time he did that, China is not going to go and publish your book until your book has been published already and made itself known, so that China doesn't have to beat its own drum.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Okay. That's hopefully all my books will be published in Chinese, and got my thing. In fact, I just mailed off 44 days to the guy, and I'm going to send him an electronic copy of China Rising. And I've got China is Communist, Damn It, coming out later this in 2017. So I'll have a body of work to offer them, and hopefully it'll work out. Well, Jay, I tell you what,
I can go ahead and die now peacefully because you're getting it done. I don't have to break my head. And
well, you're 86 years old, so I think you've got a few more years in you. And I'm amazed at your clarity and your memory and dates and everything. My gosh, it's really
But secondly,
impressive.
Jeff, last thing, you can hang up. Last thing, if you have luck and get your books published, maybe, just maybe, for all my work and the can that I put in there, there might be something in there along the lines that you might find that. Because I don't think I guess it's the same. If I want to do what you do, I have to get it published in English first. But I'm not really interested in it.
Well, I can help you do that.
Okay. We'll talk forever unless you shut me up.
Well, I tell you what, we've been on for almost an hour, and I know our fans out there, have their limits, and let's stop now, and then let's read each other's stuff, and then maybe after the new year, a little after the new year, late January, early February, let's get back on, and we'll really narrow it down to China and China, not versus, but. With the rest of the world and what China means for the 21st century, and I think we'll have a wonderful talk. How's that sound?
And great, and what it means not only for China, as I wrote in my postscripts always, what it means for America.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
America will be turned around too.
Let's hope so.
Okay.
Well, this is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland in Shenzhen. I have been talking to Jay Janson in Manhattan, New York City, USA, and it's been an amazing interview with a man who has been a top-level international musician and has performed all over the world, and apparently is still performing some in Manhattan on occasion, and a budding writer who has a very strong voice. I will. Jay, tell them what your website is, so I don't get it wrong this time. I know it's www. What is it?
Well, I don't have it memorized, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
Let me just tell you what it was. You Google Jay Janson, and the first thing comes up is an author's page. And there's 400 documented articles on there. And right underneath that is an interview with Russian television. And underneath that is a 1 hour interview with Trump.
Jay and then Janson, Jay Janson. And I will put your website on in this article. And my website is www.chinarising.puntopress.com. And Jay, it's been wonderful to have you on, and we'll get back on after the new year with a specific China related interview. Wonderful to have you on. Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Who is your audience? I'd like to know.
I just know they're all over the world. To be honest with you, mainly the United States. I've seen the Google statistics. It's mainly the United States and Europe, and then there's a lot of people in China. So the three big markets are North America, Europe, and then China. And but there's people. I mean, Africa, Australia. I mean, I've seen the map. Japan, Korea, all over Asia. There's thousands of people that listen and read my stuff each month, and even more when it's published on the Greenville Post. So, but yeah, those are the three big places: North America, Western Europe, and China, and then everything else. Russia and all that is in smaller numbers.
I'll email you my ideas on that.
Thank you very much, Jay. Hey, listen, it's been wonderful, and we'll have you back on after the holidays.
Okay.
All right?
Bye.
Bye. Zay Jian. Talk to you later, Jay. Bye-bye.
谢谢。